Hey, everybody. Welcome to this new episode of the My Impossible podcast. Today, I'm privileged to welcome Brian Alston to the show as our guest. Brian has become a friend over the last 2 years. We met through F3, the Outdoor Men's Workout Group, Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith. And we lock shields. That's an F3 term to mean that a small group of men come around each other and lock shields in support of each other's lives and in support of what we're up to in the world. And I've been privileged to walk with Brian as he's tackled his impossible that he'll share with us here in today's episode. Who Brian is to me is love. There's a love and a selflessness when it comes to Brian and how he relates to others, how he is learning to relate to himself, and how he connects with and relates to the world. Brian is a life coach, leadership coach, and building his practice to be able to serve others to achieve his mission in the world. I think you're really going to enjoy today's episode with Brian Alston. Brian Alston, welcome to the show. I am just out of my mind excited that you are here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited too.
Awesome. And with that, what is your impossible?
So I've given a lot of thought to my impossible the last year or so, and I originally thought, it was losing weight and just getting healthy, but it's bigger than that. It's a bigger dream than that. As I said before, I'm on a journey of health, but I think that that's also not just physical, but also mental and emotional too. And I've had a lot of healing to do in my life from just everything that's happened. I've dealt with depression, dealt with the loss of my parents, dealt with being overweight for most of my life, dealt with ADHD. I've dealt with, as I said, depression and anxiety. And I found that if you let it, it can make you feel very, very alone in this world. And I think that the biggest part of my impossible journey is to feel not alone anymore.
As you describe that, Brian, for our, very well what I just did, and maybe some in our audience do as well. But, I climbed with my team Mount Kilimanjaro in September. And what I've realized is that while as amazing and as great as that was, it was just context. It was a metaphor for something bigger. And it strikes me that you talked about for a moment your weight loss and your health overall, but you use that in some ways as a metaphor or context for the larger story of your impossible. Is that a good way of framing it?
I would say yes. It's definitely been something I have looked at as a journey in my struggle for my impossible to climb a mountain. In basically is what I'm trying to do in my own life. And I see getting to a point where I can truly feel happy and included and part of life again. And that is a huge journey and a huge undertaking. The weight loss started me on the journey. And as I went, I realized that it had to be bigger than that. It was something that the journey had already decided itself for me. that it was much bigger than I was realizing. I just had to learn how big my journey really was going to be. I think that's the easiest way I can put it into words. But once I started to get an inkling of how big it was, I had to change my mindset quite a bit. I had to open myself up, not only to myself and to my truth, but I had to open myself up to other people and let other people in. And that was not something that was easy for me to do, especially after years of being secluded and living like a hermit in my own life. I really felt like, something big was happening to me as this has been unfolding.
I have to pause here for a second, only because, again, for our audience's sake, at a fundraising event in August, we featured a little bit of Brian and his story for our guests. And my daughters in particular came up to me afterwards and said, and you shared in some short video clips, what the impact of knowing me and my story has been on you. My daughters came up to me and said, Dad, who is that? And what's his story? So, because I realized in that segment at the fundraiser, you never said anything about your health journey. And we didn't ask you about that. So just again, for everybody who's listening or watching, just give us the context of the health part of your story.
Okay. So, I've been considered overweight my whole life. Part of that was social, just the way society was at the time back in the 80s. You had to be thin as a rail to be considered healthy. And I was never thin as a rail. I was a big kid. Growing up, I was a big boy and a big guy. And that stuck with me until I finally, for a lot of years, I felt like I was overweight. I was a big guy. And that was the way I saw myself. It took years later for me to actually see pictures of myself in my childhood and go, I wasn't that fat. I wasn't that big. But in my head, I was. And because of that, I eventually became what I always thought that I was, which was really overweight. And I got to a point where I was almost at 500 pounds. I was only a pound or two away from it. And I was scared to death that if I crossed over that 500-pound barrier, I was dead. And I remember fasting for 3 days because I refused to get back on the scale and see anything over 500 pounds. I couldn't do it. And that was the start of me really working on losing weight. And that was back in 2010, 2011. But the problem was that even though I was losing weight and I took off over 140 pounds, I was in the mindset of, I got to lose weight. And I wasn't in the mindset of health. So what ended up happening is for a few years there, I started living really active. I was doing these 5K obstacle courses with my friends. And I was dieting, and that's all I had. I was just living on that, living on being active and hoping that would keep the weight off. And I never thought more about living a healthier lifestyle. And then I got hurt. I was working for a friend, helping him at his farm, and we were setting up their fall haunt festival. And I took a post pounder to the head, which is a pretty heavy piece of metal. And it came crashing down on my head, and it affected my lower back. It kind of went right through me, and it caused my back, and that plus a small car accident I had a month later put my back in a spasm to the point where I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even sit up for more than a couple minutes. I had to be flat on my back. And I gained back all the weight that I lost and then some, because I was suddenly in a position where I couldn't go running every single day, where I couldn't be as active as I was being to keep the weight off. And I never planned for it. I never planned to just be healthy. So I fell into a deep depression because of it. It took a couple years for me to get my back straightened out so that I could function like a human being again. And at that point, I had already surpassed the 500 pounds that I had weighed earlier, and I was closing in on 600 pounds. And I got to about 2019, and I realized that I had to do something. And I thought maybe I could start working on my weight again. And I just couldn't get myself motivated to do it. Then the pandemic hit, and I found myself living in seclusion from everybody. And my depression was the worst it was ever in. And I finally said, I have to do something about this. And I ended up talking to a mental health counselor to try and get a handle on my depression and anxiety and figure out what was going on with me. And during those talks, I discovered that I had had the wrong mindset for years. And it wasn't anything that the counselor said to me. It was something that just after talking through everything I was going through, it finally clicked with me. I wasn't living healthy. I wasn't being healthy, and I wasn't being honest with myself about that. Mm-hmm. And when I started again, and when I say start, I don't mean just losing weight, but when I actively said, I'm going to start living. I actually saw something this morning that from a great movie, Shawshank Redemption. And there was just a line in that movie that says, you either get busy living or get busy dying. Mm. And when I saw myself on the scales at 572, I knew I had to get busy living or get busy dying. There was no other way. And this time it wasn't about the weight. I knew I had to change my life around. And I started from that point on choosing to live a healthier life. And I made it so that it wasn't these goals that were long-term and out of focus for me. I made it every single day. I'm going to be healthy today. And I'm going to make healthy choices today so that at the end of the day, I can say, I am healthy. I may not be the healthiest I want to be yet, but I am being healthy. And that was a win that I could take and hold on to. It started from there. And as I started to get healthier, I started to see the bigger picture, the things that I was missing, the seclusion that I had come to embrace after the pandemic. And even before, when I was bedridden with the back injury, I didn't want anybody to see me that way. So I hid. I hid from myself, and I hid from the world. And I hid from the truth of it all. And it took me a few years to finally get to that point where I realized that I deserved better for myself. I didn't know what that was, but I knew that the pain and discomfort that I was going through wasn't worth the little bit of reward that I was getting living my life that way. And I started, once I got to a point where I felt like I could get myself out in the world, I reached out to a good mutual friend of ours, Luke Iorio, and he was hosting a monthly Circle of Trust meeting. And I asked him if I could join it. I remember it took me 3 times writing that message to him before I finally wrote it and sent it. And I remember I was scared to death that first night that I was at that meeting. But on the way home from that first night of just talking with other guys and being around a fire and a circle and sharing what's going on in life with other guys, I felt this huge weight lifting off of me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't all the weight that I needed lifted off of my shoulders, but I felt like I had done something right in my life for the first time in a long time, that I'd made strides to make myself even healthier. And that's when I started to realize that I had to rely on other people, that I needed the support of other people, and I needed other people to be around me. And from there, it's been amazing. an amazing journey of discovery, of self-discovery, of helping others, of allowing myself to be helped and to be loved. And that carries me to where I am today. Not a weight thing, but I've lost over 180 pounds at this point. Just working on myself, being healthy each day, but having the support of you and Luke and others. And also, we belong to a group called F3, and that is something that is so much more than just a fitness group. It's fitness, fellowship, and faith. And it has been a life changer for me as well. It really has helped open me up to the world again. So I know that's a little bit of a long explanation, but
no, it's beautiful, Brian. You pointed to some of those moments when things started to shift. And that could be terrifying. I can just imagine just reflecting on my own story of impossible things. I'm wondering what was it an insight? I'm sure there was many insights, but do you remember an insight, whether it be in those conversations with that first mental health counselor, private reflection, first fire circle, wherever it was, but do you remember an insight that even to this day is an insight that shifted everything for you?
I think the biggest insight was that I had to get uncomfortable with myself. I think that was the one that came to me the most. And it's the one that has been hiding behind the fear in everything that I have done. I had to accept that, just because it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, I've been lying to myself, substituting comfort for health and for a lifestyle that I thought I wanted. I just wrote about it yesterday in some journaling, that being comfortable is a siren song. It really is something that it makes you think it's an illusion. It makes you think everything's great. But when you peel back the layers, you realize that there's more out there. And honestly, when I heard you guys were going to climb Kilimanjaro, that was an eye-opening experience for me as well, because I looked at my life to that point and I said to myself, they're going to do something amazing. Why am I not working as hard as they are at my own life to be doing something amazing too? So you inspired me. The entire team going to Kilimanjaro inspired me. And the conversations that we've had. So I wouldn't say there was, other than that moment, I wouldn't say there was one specific moment. It was constant inspiration after that point that has pushed me to step out of my shell, to be uncomfortable. And
tell me more about your history with, you mentioned comfort is a siren song. Say more about your relationship with discomfort and or with being comfortable. Tell us more about that, because it just feels there is, I like to call some of these ideas, there's the mythic element of it, and then there's the very specific. So you have your very specific, but there's a mythic, meaning universal element here that I think everyone needs to hear. So just tell us your specific relationship, either with being uncomfortable or the converse of being comfortable.
So being uncomfortable, I would say, started when I was very young. My father had a bad car accident when I was 5. And it changed who he was as a person. He had a bad head injury from it, and it took away the joy in his life. And I was the oldest of three. I still am the oldest of three, but I was also the only boy in the family. So I was always under scrutiny by my father, and there was no joy, there was no happiness there. And I lived in a constant state of anxiety and fear. I didn't know what it was at the time because I was only a kid, but that's how I lived my life. And I would do whatever I could to hide, to shirk that gaze that was always on me, being hide in my room or whatever I could do to not be there, to not be a focus of his anger or his frustration that he had. And that went on, until unfortunately shortly before he passed away. He suffered from anxiety and depression and things that I suffer from. And it wasn't until he was in the hospital at the end of his life, and they actually regulated him on some antidepressants and other medications, anti-anxiety medications. It was like I got my dad back from the first time in my life, and I didn't know what to do with that. And I found myself afraid, very much afraid, because I didn't know how to live my life without feeling like I was constantly being judged. And the only way I knew how to live my life was to seek that comfort of hiding. Mm. So hiding became a comfort for me. Living on my own became a comfort for me because I didn't have to answer to anybody when I lived on my own. When I shut that front door, I felt that sense of relief that the rest of the world couldn't find me. And it was, I say comfortable, but the truth was it was a huge relief off my shoulders every single time I walked through that door and shut it behind me. But like I said, that's not living. What I learned from that is that's surviving. And I survived some stuff that I should never have had to survive as a child or as an adult. And it took me a lifetime to finally learn that the world wasn't as scary as I thought. And that this discomfort that I felt wasn't always going to feel the same way. Some discomfort is good. It wasn't always going to be a judgment on me. But I needed my friends to help me show that light to me because I couldn't find it on my own. And that became a real struggle because I put a lot of faith on my friends to do that for me initially in my life, and then asked probably more of them than I ever should have initially, and they may not have been prepared for it. And I've lost some friends over the years because of that, which is when I withdrew back into myself. But as one of the guys in the last circle that we had, they said to me, "You're not asking the right questions." And what I learned was that out of fear, I was reacting, asking questions out of fear instead of asking questions from a place of power that would help me grow. And when I started to do that, the world started to open up to me. People started to respond to me, get closer to me, want to be there for me. Hell, even love me and make me want to love myself again, which has been a huge, huge hurdle for me to get over.
Brian, what would you say is just in this, as you've described your journey, clearly there was an impossible in your story. My sense though is, and that's where you went when I asked you the first question. It was almost the answer to the question is what you answered was what was my impossible. So I'm curious, what is, here we're recording at the beginning of October 2025, what is your impossible?
I think my impossible at this time is to love myself more than I ever have before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting there. It's a journey. And it's not a journey on my own. It's a journey that is going to take a lot of support and a lot of proof from other people as well as myself. But I was thinking about it today, and I really think that that is the place that I want to get to. I've often talked when I'm coaching people about how important it is to accept yourself and to love yourself and to know yourself so fully that nobody can make you doubt yourself. It is easier to preach than it is to do. And I am still working through that on my own. So there are parts of me that I'm not happy with, but I'm learning to own them and I'm learning to embrace them and to love them anyway.
Mm.
That was probably the biggest lesson that I had to learn and the one that I am still learning now. And that's probably what my impossible is.
Mm. Mm. And what, from a place of love and self-acceptance of all your parts, even the parts maybe you don't like very much at a particular moment, what do you see as possible in your life when that's true?
I know it's going to sound like a simple answer, but it means that I can do anything.
Mm.
And that in itself is huge for me because I've lived my life with the constraint of, no, you can't do that. I grew up with, no, you can't do that. When I got bigger and I couldn't physically do things, no, you can't do that. I've lived my life with no as my answer. And I don't want to live like no is my answer anymore. I want to be able to look at something and go, can I do it? I don't know. But the answer is not going to be no. It's going to be yes, because I'm going to make it happen.
I'll share. I don't know if you've ever seen me do this or talk about this. So I was speaking to a group of students who are uniquely able, to have different issues in their lives. And I said, hold up your hand. And I said, I can do it. I can do it. And there's just this kinesthetic. And I remember this moment, actually the night before we summited Kilimanjaro, and I was having a lot of doubts if I should even do it. And I laid in bed in the cut and I said, I can do it. And it just strikes me like that's a kinesthetic thing that you could, whether you adapt that particular thing with your fingers or not, but it just feels like that's where you're headed and where you are and where you're headed even more towards is I can do it.
I love that. And I can definitely do that. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah. You talked about community, and I want to dig into that a little bit because, as you know, with My Impossible, our phrase is My Impossible is our possible. Talk about even more. You pointed to it, friends, F3. Talk more about the catalyzing impact for you of the hour of community.
Well, right now I have a goal that I've set for myself. As you know, I'm going to be doing a 5K, my first 5K in 13 years, on November 9th. I would not be even considering doing something like this without the support of you and Luke and our friend Dan and all the guys from F3 and my other friends getting behind me, supporting me, several of you joining me on this quest to do this. And it's not just about, okay, it's a 5K and it's over. It means something to me. It means I'm getting out there in the world and I'm saying yes to the world again. And I couldn't do that without the support and the brotherhood and sisterhood of my friends and everyone who is supporting me through this. Because every time I have a doubt, I have somebody I can reach out to, a lifeline that is there for me, and that is something I didn't let into my life before. So I'm looking forward. I'm scared to death about doing this 5K, but I'm looking forward to doing it and to doing it with everybody who's supporting me and seeing what comes from there, because it's only a stepping stone to something bigger. I know that now. And when I was paying the entrance fee, the registration fee, I realized that this is not the only 5K I'm going to, walk or run. There's going to be more. And whether I'm in the driver's seat for myself or I'm out there helping somebody else, because it's a two-way street. It's not just about getting support. It's also about being there and being the one to do the support as well. And that means as much to me as getting support, because when you flip it around, that's the same mindset that's in everybody's head. Everybody who's out there helping me is doing it because they want to. And they are getting some joy from seeing me succeed as much as I'm getting, the joy from succeeding. So I couldn't do this without the support of F3, of you guys, of my family, of my friends, of all of it. It just, as you said, it's catalyzing. It's lifting me up every single day. I get out of bed every single day and I know I'm not alone. And that is the best feeling in the world.
It strikes me, and I have had this experience that, yes, people love me and they want to be a part of just supporting me. But what I've realized, and I'm curious what you've seen here, what I've realized is it's about the mission that we're up to. Yes, Kilimanjaro, but even bigger than that, the mission of My Impossible and inspiring people like you and others to take on their impossible. That's what has drawn people in. It began with a personal connection, but then there's something bigger. And I'm wondering if you were to name your mission in the world that you're inviting people, the Brian Alston mission in the world, that you're inviting a community of people to come around. Again, the starting point is you. We love you. We just want to support you. But if you were to name in this moment, or even just piece it together, maybe you haven't thought of it before now, what's the Brian Alston mission that you're inviting people to come around?
That's a great question. Well, I think the first piece of it is what I often tell people when they ask me about coaching, is that I want to help people succeed. But success is a very general term. And I know from a personal place, and it took me years to really understand what was going on in my world. I would get to a point when something became really personal to me, I would close off. I would shut down. And it's like listening to a radio station in your life, and the radio station comes in nice and clear when it's other people's issues that you're helping with or other projects or whatnot. But when it became personal to me, I would hear static. I would lose that radio station. And it was because of the fear that I felt. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I learned, it was my fear. It was my gremlins. It was all those things, those roadblocks that were holding me back from being the best me that I could be. That's what I want to help other people achieve. I want to clear away their static and help them see the people that we see they already are, the great people, and have them succeed in ways that they never thought possible. I don't want them to feel that static that I felt in the world. I want them to know that they're great right from the get-go and know that they're loved and that they will never be alone. If I had to sum it all up, that's what I think the Brian method is.
Yeah. And if I could just offer is spend more time with that, Brian, and start to share that in small or big ways, whatever you decide, is just that to let people know that when they are coming alongside you, yes, they are supporting you as a human, as an individual, and they're coming alongside a mission in the world that's bigger than all of us. That's really beautiful. I can't wait to hear you talk about that. And because there's something really powerful there. Brian, as we wrap, I'm just going to give you the floor and you get to speak to the audience. Maybe there's somebody that's in a life situation similar to yours. Maybe not. Maybe they just have their own impossible that they have in their life. The floor is yours. What do you want to say to them?
Don't be afraid. Or better yet, be afraid, but don't let that fear stop you. I think in this world, we have so much to be afraid of. But that fear holds us back from being who we are and the greatness that we can be. And when we realize that we can get past the fear, we realize that we have something special to share with the world. And I urge everybody to work on sharing that gift with the world and make it a better place.
Awesome. Brian, if folks want to reach out to you or follow you, get to know you and your story, where can we go?
Well, they can reach out to me. They can always reach out to me by email, which is brianc.alston, ALSTON, @gmail.com, or they can find me on Facebook, and I think it's Brian C. Alston on Facebook, or BC Alston 01 on Facebook. You can find me that way. I'm always happy to talk, or you can look up my website for coaching at bcacoaching.com.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes. Brian, you're a gift to me. You're a gift to the world. So thankful for this time together.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that. And you are a gift as well.